Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks, Avalanche, for having us in this amazing setting. We're here to talk about on-chain finance and real-world assets on Avalanche. I'm Camila Russo, the founder of the Defiant, the best source for DeFi and Web3 information. I'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll kick off the panel.
Great. Hey, everybody. I'm Dave, CEO and co-founder of OpenTrade. We provide a stablecoin yield-as-a-service platform. So we work with neobanks and other fintechs that are building on stablecoins to help them earn and pay their users yield in a fully white-labeled and embedded way.
Hey, everyone. I'm Kevin Chan. I'm at Steakhouse Financial. We're a risk advisory group working with many of the largest DeFi platforms. We currently are risk carriers of Morpho with about 600 million TVL. We help advise and manage Sky, formerly known as MakerDAO's balance sheet, which is the third largest circulating stablecoin, around 7 billion. And we just recently launched Camila Vault as of today. So yeah, excited to chat about on-chain finance.
I'm Sean Ford with XSY. We are a capital management platform that has a series of stable assets, stable derivatives that we are building. We launched our first one, Unity, last Thursday on Avalanche. We have over 30 million of TVL in just a few days, which is fantastic. And before that, I was one of the founders of Algorand, and I'm working my way through the A's of crypto, Algorand, ADA, and now AVAX. And so I'm in the middle of that now, but glad to be here.
Hi, I'm David from Backed Finance. We've been in the tokenization game a very long time now. Started off in T-bills and Eurobonds and all this fun stuff, very unfun stuff, really. And now we're really focused on bringing tokenized stocks to market in a way that expands access and, yeah, just trying to tie together the convergence of TradFi and DeFi.
Great. OK, let's start with a question for all of the panelists, just getting to the core of the theme. So what are the roadblocks for scaling DeFi and RWAs on Avalanche, and what can be done to overcome those roadblocks? Dave, if you can start.
I mean, to be honest, I don't see any really significant roadblocks. I just think that everything we're doing is going to take time. So I think a lot of the major roadblocks have been cleared, whether it's regulatory, technological, education, knowledge, reputation. There's nothing that like pops out at me as like, this is, if we don't do this, we're not going to make it. I think it's just a natural, we keep plugging away all these companies in this room, all the people up here on stage. You know, give us a few more years, and these things will live in the wallets of you know, hundreds of millions of people. I'm optimistic.
That's interesting. I think it's the first time I've heard that answer. Because, you know, there's been roadblocks on so many different fronts in crypto, right, for many years. Regulation is a big one. The kind of technical barriers to scaling throughput and so on. UX, UI, difficulties, to name a few, and education, like you named. So yeah, really optimistic view. Yeah, interested to hear whether you agree, Kevin.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. All the pieces are there, like you said, and not necessarily a roadblock, but one thing that we're seeing a lot in many ecosystems is just specialization. As the kind of on-chain finance world matures, you're seeing different teams, different projects, different protocols focus on a part of the stack and do that really well. And I think as I look at the certain ecosystems and certain teams, some of that specialization is just not quite there. And I think it's a hard choice for teams to make, like, do I focus on this piece, or do I spread my bets across multiple different products in different like areas? It's a tough challenge to face as a founder, but one thing that I think would help accelerate this space, and certainly that something that we take a hard view on, is, you know, we specialize on the risk layer, and we work with amazing protocols and projects on building on to build on top of, and we don't spread ourselves too thin. We basically focus on our piece of the puzzle, and we do that really well. And I think if teams do that, we can see a lot of acceleration.
So I'm going to take a slightly different tack here. I think so. My confidence that DeFi is going to ultimately be successful is very high. The timing of that is probably going to be, multiple years. And if you talk about roadblocks, I don't think it's roadblocks to success. I think it's more roadblocks to adoption. People equate complexity with a lack of trust. And especially if you're looking at public capital that's used to all sorts of clarity and all sorts of simplicity for the end user, we certainly don't have that in DeFi right now. If you look at just the basic steps that are required to acquire, trade, swap, whitelist, mint, all of the different pieces with all of the different players, it creates a stilted use case for people that are trying to get involved. And if that's true, they stop trusting the process if there's that many steps. So it's a little bit like you want to make sure that the user right now kind of has to understand TCP/IP, and you don't want them to have to do that to be able to use what we're creating. And so I think that's what we're trying to do at XE, is really build a simplified capital management platform to expand use by simplifying the user's interactions with the world that we live in, and that I do believe will be greatly successful in the next few years.
I'm actually going to carry on that thought because I agree, but I also think it needs to be, one, as simple as possible for the users that want it to be as simple as possible, but there still needs to be the usability for the hardcore DeFi users that want to take, let's say, a tokenized stock and stick it on a lending market. And to create a product that can do both is very, very difficult from a regulatory perspective. But I think, yeah, probably one of the biggest roadblocks for adoption from DeFi natives is the usability aspect, because right now, why not get your yield from somewhere else? Why not get it off-chain? Why not buy your stocks off-chain? The only time it's going to become a better idea to do this on-chain is when suddenly there's this usability premium where you can buy on one exchange, sell on another, stick it in a lending market, do all this weird stuff with it, collateralize your own stable coins with it. That is when I think we'll start to see a change in behavior. That's probably the biggest roadblock in my opinion.
I agree.
Okay, and so it looks like broadly everyone agrees that most of the big roadblocks are we've overcome them, and now it's a road to adoption. What's the next big challenge? And in this environment, in this road, how does Avalanche specifically differentiate from all the multiple layer ones out there? This is also for all the panelists.
Yeah, I'll start. I heard it actually said earlier today in the first talk, which was obviously scalability, throughput, composability, inversions, now taking the Avalanche infrastructure, building their own L1. Those are all great features. I think for us, by and large, the reason we're so tied to Avalanche is the ecosystem, is just the number of companies at this conference and in this room, and that we met over the weekend at the FinTech Forum. Sort of the business development ecosystem building that Avalanche is doing is by far the best in the industry. And technology was a consideration, but it wasn't really the main driver of our decision making, and it works. It works.
Yeah, I would say it's been an Avalanche's strategy all along to basically bring the largest institutions and the best partners on chain. And I think doubling down on that strategy is certainly playing to the Avalanche ecosystem's advantage. One of the reasons that we're closely looking at the ecosystem is especially for that reason. So we were speaking with kind of the leaders at Apollo, at BlackRock, Securitize, et cetera, and they all have ongoing projects with Avalanche, right? And those are the, again, inputs that we need to then create a market or create that risk module that we can then kind of productize and sell and basically offer to downstream users, platforms, et cetera. So doubling down on that institutional strategy, I think, is a really key objective here.
So I think for us, given that we've got a capital markets team, we're talking about new derivative products, certainly the finality in less than 2 seconds, the performance of the tech is super important. I think the non-probabilistic consensus is super helpful. That helps with settlement and trust there. I think the bigger thing is that the way that the Avalanche architecture has been sort of created is one that encourages, it's sort of a welcoming architecture for people that want to build their own a little bit more than some of the other chains. So in that respect, it also, to Kevin's point, just I'm restating your point on this one, is that it becomes something that picks up some of the weight of adoption versus just the project driving adoption. The chain itself, given how it's created and used, pulls some of that weight along as a partner, which is one of the things that we found very attractive.
I'm not a tech guy, so that was some of that stuff went slightly over my head, but that's okay. Yeah, from my perspective, I think it's honestly comes down to the enthusiasm of the ecosystem and the team. Like if you have a team that share a vision, like for example the Avalanche team, when I get in a call with them, I know they want to make something happen, and we work together to make it happen. And I've worked with other chains where that simply isn't the case. To me, that's the defining factor from like a business standpoint. It's a very collaborative process, and it has to be.
Great. And now doubling down on a bit on each of your specific fields and projects. David, on Backed, you are building, you're tokenizing different securities, stocks, and so forth, bringing them on chain. But, this has been tried so many times in crypto, and adoption has been a bit lackluster. It seems like the crypto native user and trader isn't really interested, or so far hasn't been interested in this sort of product. Do you think, it's a matter of like we're early and maybe it's a different kind of audience that will want RWAs, or what's kind of the path for adoption on those types of tokens?
So I'd actually counter that with, I can't remember how many years ago now, maybe 4 or 5, synthetics, for example, on-chain were like a between $2 and $5 billion market cap. And then they basically all fell apart, I think, with like various collapses that destroyed everything and the trust in them. And I think pretty much probably everyone on this stage can agree a big part of being in the RWA industry now has been regaining that trust to do things properly. When we developed our product, that was the #1 thing we wanted to create, something that was truly bankruptcy remote, that was legal ownership on-chain, and that if basically, no, we can't rug like the synthetics guys did or whatever when they were creating synthetic tokenized stocks. I think the other biggest barrier to making sure that retail has access to these things is that most tokenized assets on-chain right now are not built in a way for retail access. They are, if you're a professional investor or a professional institution, or you're doing treasury management. And that's why we have solutions like OpenTrade, who are creating these vaults that allow retail users to plug in money and they get the yield from the back end. Our big bet has always been that really it's about creating access in countries where the financial rails are just not what we're used to in Western world, more developed financial ecosystems. So for us, it's always been about building a retail grade product. And really, I think centralized exchanges are probably the biggest player in that space. So many of them now are going towards becoming an everything app where you can buy your crypto and also your stocks. You see Bybit just announced CFDs that you can buy with USDT. There is a clear convergence between these two worlds. And yeah, I'm hoping the bet that retail is going to pick up will pay off. And I think a lot of it will come from a completely abstracted way where you don't even know you're dealing with a tokenized asset.
Yeah, I think those are great points. Going through, like the tokenizing route from a more compliant way and path, I think will be very helpful because, like a Mirror with Terra, that failed because of all the regulatory problems and like so many other projects. And like it needs to be super easy for the end user. Sean, with XE, you are creating a project that's meant to bring yield to stablecoins, so the user exchanges their USDC for for XE, I believe, and then you use those funds to deploy in a yield strategy and bring those returns back to the user. Which, it's great at, putting your stablecoins to work, but it also adds a lot of risk to, holding stablecoins. So how do you strike that balance from a user who, starts by owning USDC and, deposits that with XE, and then how do you make sure that they understand the level of risk that they're taking? There's been so many different catastrophes in DeFi and CeFi from people not knowing how their crypto is being used.
There's a lot, sort of several things to unpack there. So on the risk side, I'll just take that off the table. I mean, people need to understand the risk. We take that very seriously. We list all of the risks that you would see, not just with us, but in the space in pretty extensive detail, as you would if you were participating in a more traditional financial market. Austin Campbell works with us, and he's one of the sort of preeminent authorities on risk and regulatory challenges, and so we take that very seriously, and I think it's just transparency in the same way that you'd see it with other opportunities. In terms of the sort of stable coin comment or stable asset comment, I do think that, idle capital is wasted capital. And so if you want to just hold a stable asset and hold on to it, and, you're really underserving why you hold it in the first place. So I think that, for us, it's a matter of, providing clarity on the risks and also making sure that the capital is actually being put to work in a useful way. I think that, as we see the clarity in the market and as we see more people start to adopt, we started this conversation with RWA questions. I actually think that holding out hope that traditional finance will somehow, a light bulb will go off because there's clarity of risk and because there's, more utility in the space is probably a false flag. If you look at other industries, in particular, you see that what ends up happening is that the traditional players don't drive the innovation. It's the native asset creators that do drive the innovation. Something that, you saw with like Netflix and Apple, they weren't creators, but now they're creators. And, the traditional sort of entertainment companies fell behind. And I think that what we're seeing is a resurgence of RWAs that will come from, sort of inverted from this group, that will ultimately become more and more credible and more transparent, and that will become the place where we see real value created going forward in the RWA space and in the stable asset space that we're in as well. So it's a little bit of a flip. Waiting for TradFi is probably something that's going to be like waiting for Godot. That's my take on that, if you know that reference, everybody.
Kevin, risk is your specialty, so maybe you want to comment on, how maybe the advantages that DeFi has over CeFi in bringing more transparency to the risks in investing?
Yeah, definitely. I think I view risk in a similar lens, with the extension of risk is effectively, the set of decisions that you make and the consequences of those decisions and having to live with them. And one of the things that we're building out at Sky, in particular, managing its sort of $7 billion balance sheet, is an allocation system that has all of those basically risk decisions codified into smart contracts, and obviously governed by the DAO, but basically that provides the ultimate level of transparency because it's immutable code that operates exactly as intended, with the inputs sourced transparently via oracles, integrated with the top asset managers in the world. We just deployed about $1.5 billion into tokenized treasuries, for example, using said system, and that is the advantage that, you know, on-chain finance provides. It's basically codifying the decisions that you've made. You can always modify them, but when you make them, they're there and they're sort of unbiased. They're not intermutable, basically.
Yeah, no, I agree that DeFi brings a huge advantage to just making sure that people know exactly how their funds are being used with, like, you know, open blockchains and codifying risk. Dave, at OpenTrade, I think it's, you know, I'd love to get a glimpse on how fintechs are using your infrastructure to bring stablecoins and other DeFi products to end users.
It's a great question, and it's the thing that we're most passionate about, my co-founders in the crowd. Right now, there are well over 1 million people in Latin America who can open up their mobile phone and with 2 clicks deposit US dollars or euros into a bankruptcy remote structure where they're able to earn up to 9% interest on dollars backed by bonds, ETFs, treasury bills, money markets, and then withdraw their money with 1 click, get it same day, and then send that US dollar anywhere in the world. No private keys, no ledger wallets, no crypto. The crypto is not play into any part of their experience, right? And that's a capability that helps them save for college, helps them grow their business if they're a remote worker or an entrepreneur, helps them go on vacation, helps them protect their money. And that's a use case that is happening today. And so, like, what does OpenTrade do? We work with great companies, some of whom are at this conference, basically stablecoin powered neobanks to make that experience real. And the end user never says DeFi, never says crypto, never says private key. And so that's like when we talk about adoption, and probably why I'm so optimistic is because I just, like, every day I wake up, I'm seeing that, like, happen. And it's something that was impossible a few years ago. Like, crypto or not, it wasn't possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super exciting, and, you know, that use case, just like bringing open finance to emerging markets, that's what really got me passionate about crypto. So great to see that. And with 4 minutes left, I'd love to hear from the rest of the panelists on, you know, your view. If to scale DeFi, does crypto need to disappear? Like, will it be through integrations with traditional financial companies, through fintechs, in a way that the end user doesn't even know that they're using blockchains? Or will it require some sort of re-education where users understand that, okay, now I am self-custodying, they understand the use of private keys, they understand that there's composability, and, you know, because there's kind of that trade-off when crypto disappears, you also lose a bit of the functionality. So how does that kind of balance look like for the rest of the panelists?
I think Morpho aptly call it the DeFi mullet, right? You've got the business up front, the DeFi party in the back, which I think, as you say, it's the abstraction. I don't think my dad is ever going to want to know what a private key is. I think I speak for most people. Like, if you want to use these more efficient rails and drive the disintermediation that blockchain provides, you can't rely on everyone to be a massive blockchain nerd like we are. It just isn't going to work if we're going to bring tons of more people on chain. The trick is they don't know they're coming on chain. That's my take, at least.
I think that the general, I think, truism for any emerging industry is the extent to which the tech or the process is visible to the user is the extent to which the industry's failed the user. Like, and so if you believe that's true, I'm in complete agreement. I think, though, that what we're going to see is, for us, I don't think crypto is going to go away. I don't think it needs to go away. I just think that there needs to be a more user-oriented view towards improving the ability for people to access and the ability for people to get information at the level that they want information. If it's opening an account, that's one thing. If it's investing in a complex derivative, you probably want more information than that, but we have to meet the user at where they want to be met.
Yeah, I would generally say I agree. Like the user experience is going to continually improve. One thing that I will say is I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, in particular because we're exploring a lot of adoption around identity primitives that's naturally going to create friction in the process, and then we're going to improve upon that, we're going to iterate upon that, but at the end of the day, yeah, crypto, DeFi, whatever, it should be in the background. The UX is going to be intuitive and not present that to the user as much.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for a great panel. Super interesting. I think, I think we're left with a really optimistic view of where we're going with DeFi and RWAs. Everyone's in agreement that DeFi is the future of finance, that there are very few roadblocks in the way of us getting there, that it should be, DeFi should provide a safer way for users to transact and just make financial products available for people globally in a way that just wasn't possible before, and that's really exciting. So thanks so much to all the panelists, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.